This week on Overtime, we look at singleness, a godly perspective. It's an exciting conversation. If you're single, if you have a friend that's single, this is one you don't want to miss. Make sure you like and subscribe. Let's get it.
Welcome to Center City Overtime, a weekly podcast where we take a little more time to dive into Sunday's message.
And this Sunday,
Big Sunday.
Yeah, we continued our series on what we've called Path. Ultimately, this idea that so many times when people talk about the will of God, they kind of get lost in the destination.
Right.
And yet what we read in Scripture is this idea that every step is directed by the Lord and that He's more concerned about your journey than the destination, that ultimately the destination is this beautiful product of the will of God, but that every day He makes provision for your kind of the steps that you take. So week one, we talked about marriage. And then finally this week, we talked about singleness.
Yeah.
Did you have a good time?
I had a great time. I'm just really thankful. I've been in church my whole life and I've never heard a message on singleness. Maybe I was home that day, don't want to say that no one's ever given one, but it was such a gift to be able to take an entire Sunday and speak about what a gift it is. So thank you for giving me that opportunity.
No problem. It was a pleasure. The congregation, the community as a whole really did benefit from this perspective. And I wanted to kind of start there because more than just singles, you introduced this idea, which kind of carried over from last week a little bit, of wholeness. And that we are not completed in one another, but we're completed through our relationship with Christ. You actually had this kind of statement. I think the whole room just kind of audibly agreed with you when you were like, if you're looking for completion in somebody else, that somehow that you're looking in the wrong direction is the way that you frame that. Why is wholeness so critical, specifically to singles, but kind of to everybody?
Well, I think I don't want to beat up on advertisers, but I do think we live in a world where people make a lot of money on telling us that we're not complete and we're not whole. And I don't even mean that specifically has to do with what our romantic status is. I just we're constantly bombarded with if you really want to be complete at this, then you need this product or you need this product. And so we're constantly fighting whoever we are, this messaging that who we are isn't enough. We need something to be able to add to that. And then I think when you move specifically into what we kind of believe culturally about romantic relationships, there is this idea that you need to find that one person who is going to complete you. So I do feel like sometimes singles experience that even more because it's not just coming from everyone trying to sell you every product, but you've got people who are making apps and websites, and you've got TV shows and movies and all sorts of stories that the ultimate goal of those stories is to find your one person and then start your life together. And so we just kind of constantly hear this, who you are by yourself isn't enough. And that's just, it's kind of true when we're speaking of by ourselves without God, but it's just not true when you have life with God. It is enough.
Yeah. So, one of the reasons why I didn't dare touch this message is so much, and there's so much that we talk about that really is outside of the scope of my personal experience because of the nature of the Word of God and how He's kind of equipped us to communicate to the whole of it. But singleness for me was 17, 18 years old, trying to figure out kind of who I was going to date in high school. I know that the way that I'm wired, and, we can talk a little bit about this eventually, but the way that I'm wired, companionship, that was just a thing. I knew I was going to get married, just kind of walk through that. So I don't know singleness outside of any of the other, out of that picture of being a 17, 18-year-old kid in high school. So you did a little bit of a work at the beginning, kind of establishing who you were talking about when you talked about singleness, and I was a little taken back. And it's not that I didn't know this, but I was just a little bit taken.
So always stop and think about,
all the kind of people who may be single. So before we kind of get too much further down this line, would you kind of unpack that a little bit, all these different seasons of singleness?
Yeah, I think it's so all-encompassing that sometimes we don't even know what we're talking about. So I really wanted to make sure that people felt seen and known. And just within our community, we have people who have been single for their whole lives, people in their 30s and 40s who have wrestled with that, who didn't want to be single and that's where they are. And then we also have people kind of in that same life stage who are very content in their singleness and are happy that way. But then you've got people who are widowed and they did make this commitment and have long and healthy, happy marriages, but now they find themselves single again. And we have people who have walked through divorce and really felt the brokenness of that and are also seeing God's redemption on the other side of that, who are single. And then you've got your kind of younger, to your point, we've got the teenagers and the 20-somethings who are also single, but it's this kind of season of life where that feels a little different because everyone's kind of in that spot. And, so you're dating and you're hanging out with your friends and you're kind of figuring out what your adulthood is going to look like. And all of those people are walking through seasons of singleness. Some of them will end up getting married on the other side of it, and some of them won't. But it's a really vast term.
Yeah, I think there was a couple times, and I keep referring to my notes because there's a couple times that I was just taken back by just some thoughts that you had kind of leveraged. You went through this whole myth of being single. You got to watch the whole thing. If you're single, if you have friends who are single, if you have kids who are single, like that's some of the thought that I had even listening. Like, how do I prepare my boys who, of course, now I know we're close to, walking through a single relationship season. But with that said, to some degree, I'm going to have 17 and 18-year-old boys who are walking single. How do I prepare them for that that season? And one of the things that I thought was powerful was your idea of being chosen.
Yeah.
Would you unpack that?
Yeah, I think for me personally, anytime that I've really wrestled with my singleness and wished that I was not single, it's been that feeling of, it looks like everyone around me is pairing off and everyone's had someone choose them. Like they've had someone who said, I want to spend my life with you. You're my top priority person. Like, you're just the one that I choose. And as single people, we kind of have to wrestle with like, no one's made that choice about me. And that can be kind of hard when you feel like it's all around you. And what's true is that God has made that choice about each one of us, married or single. And he did choose us. He did choose us. I know words, guys. But before we were even born, he chose us and set us aside as his people. There's something so powerful to that. And I think, especially in the church, because we've heard that all our lives, we lose sight of what it really means that the creator of the universe chose you, that nothing about your life is an accident or unintentional, that there is this purpose to you that I just really want people to grasp, because it took me a long time to get that myself. And it was just like chain breaking and freeing to really realize the truth of that.
Yeah, you sensed it in the room, and it was why I noted it. You just kind of felt like people were sitting up in their chairs a little bit taller, knowing that this thing that they were looking for, you've had the whole time. You may even be watching now thinking, and maybe somebody made a different choice. Maybe you're walking through a season of singleness because someone made a bad choice, and now you're dealing with the consequences of that bad choice. It doesn't mean you're still not chosen. You have been chosen. It does kind of straighten the spine up, put a little pep in the step to know, like, no, I am a chosen child of the Most High God.
Yeah.
And I'm completed in that. I don't need to find that completion in someone else. But with that said, I do know that whenever we do speak about singleness, one of the issues that a lot of singles struggle with is this feeling of being alone. So what do you say to the person who's watching that may feel alone?
Well, I think there are a couple of reasons that we can feel alone. So I'm going to kind of answer that in two parts. The first is that in the same way that God chose you, God is also with you. Like there's never a time that we're alone. The Holy Spirit dwells inside us. Like you can talk to God at any point, at any moment, and he's listening. He hears you, and God does speak back to us. It's just not in the way that you get a conversation back from a friend. Or I remember walking through a time when I was so frustrated because I'd be like, God, if you could just give me a hug, that would be really great. And it's not that way, but one of my favorite prayers to pray is that God would show up in a creative and very personal way to let someone know that he's there. And he does that, like just in those little ways. So ask him to do that. Like there's nothing wrong with saying, God, I just need to know that you're with me. Will you show me somehow? And he will. He shows up. The other side to that is that I do think sometimes we put ourselves into unhealthy places of being alone because we're not willing to do the work to build close relationships. And we need those. Like, we need bigger community, but everybody needs close relationships. That doesn't just not apply if you're not married. And so it may be that you have to do that kind of uncomfortable work of being an adult. It's just hard to make friends sometimes, but talking to that neighbor, inviting someone to go on a walk, asking that coworker if they want to get lunch, and kind of starting to build those friendships so that you have someone you can call when you're in a spot and you just need a friend.
What I thought you did that was so good is you set the table. So like we went through these myths of singleness, and you really did a great job of not just preparing the singles for what was coming, but also like really compelling those who are not single, like, hey, this is something that's important. I want you to lean in. And in that, one of the things that we tend to do is we don't just focus on kind of the perils of the season, but we do tend to focus on the gift of the season. And you did a masterful job communicating like the beauty of this season as a single person. And you talked about two of these gifts in particular, one time and one focus. If someone's watching as a single right now, what would you say to them as it pertains to this season and how it can be a gift?
Well, I think just knowing that it is a gift is a place to start, because so often we're so focused on what we don't have that we miss out on what we do have. And the first thing is time. Like, if you're single, you have time to hang out with people. You have time to invest in your faith community. If you're part of Center City, you can invest here. And there's just this flexibility because you're not worried about making sure that you're carving out time to be with your spouse, and you're not worried about making sure that you've got time to take care of your family and spend time with your kids. We have this freedom that really can add up to be quite a big amount of time to invest in something that you're passionate about, something that you're gifted in. And it should be exciting. Like, it's okay to be content in your singleness. It doesn't mean that you think that it's better than the gift of marriage or something else. It's just realizing and appreciating the gift that you have.
Because I've done life with singles for a long time, and most of us have, like, there's probably a person in your life who's single and you don't really even consider that. Unfortunately, it's just the nature of kind of how we do life together. But one of the things that I do know is from time to time, that gift of time can be abused by other people. Oh, my friend's single, she can take care of that. He can take care of that. We'll just have them do the thing, whether it's stay late after everybody goes home because they don't have a family to go home to, things like that. Like, what would you say? How do you navigate healthy relationships in that way?
Yeah, I think you got to figure out what your boundaries are. So some of them it's a little easier. Like, if you sign a contract and you have a job and you find that people are asking you to do more than that because they need to get home to their families and you don't, I mean, I know this sounds harsh, but you bring in HR and you look at what you actually agreed to, and you don't have to do more than that just because you're in a different life stage, regardless of what they make you think. I think where it gets tricky is when it's kind of in that personal relationship and it's people that you care about. The joke that always comes up is babysitting, like, oh, my single friends are my babysitters. And it just requires having those open conversations about what you are willing to do, what you would like to do. I will say, and I know this might not sound what would be popular, wise advice in this day and age. I do think we sometimes hide behind our boundaries. And so I would ask single people to really consider, are there places where you are being selfish with that time that you have, which is different from taking time to rest. There's a place for rest and a place for play, but there may be some places that the Holy Spirit is prompting you to kind of step in and share that time more than you might think. And a lot of times we're like, no, it's all about self-care. It's all about boundaries. But I would consider what you can do with that time.
Yeah, which leads me to the way that you closed. And I think it's the way that I just wanted to kind of sum this all up. You spoke specifically out of Romans 12, this idea that we would love like family and that we would delight in honor. Because I do think
I thought about that PS in the car on the way here. When someone cut me off, I was like, you know what? I'm going to honor you, and you just have your space, buddy. So look at me learning from myself. Anyway.
This podcast, we just cover everything. Love your neighbors, love the co-drivers sharing the road with you. So love like family and delight in honor. How do we love like family and how do we delight in honor?
This, I think, is awesome because I feel like you really taught this in your message on marriage a week ago. And I hope the single people were listening, because there's so much you can take out of that. It's not exactly the same as loving a spouse, but loving like family means laying your life down for people. It means sacrificing for their well-being. You talked about in marriage, both being dedicated to seeing the other person win. Well, this just takes that out into community. And like, I want to see the people around me succeed and thrive and live that life to the fullest that Jesus promises. And I want to do what I can to help them get there. We sometimes buy into this idea that we have to kind of compete with the people around us, but like, I just want to help people succeed and celebrate when they do. So yeah, that's what I would say is loving like family.
Yeah, I think we need to stop allowing culture to set the terms of our conversation. Like, I think honor is a good word. I think the fact that I honor you doesn't mean that I think anything less of me. I'm not, laying myself down at your feet and groveling. And, I do feel like what we read over and over in scriptures, this idea that as believers, what makes us so different is the fact that we are willing to love like family. And we not only delight in honor, but you talked about that competition, that idea of like almost
outdoing one another. Yeah.
In this area of honor. And I think it's what historically has separated us from as a church. Like, it separated us culturally when the whole world was focused on, self-preservation and indulging in selfish acts. And it was all about, me. You see this band of misfits who came along and said, no, we're going to love like Christ loved and lay our lives down for one another and respect one another and be willing, again, I think we're moving to this place in culture where I have to be true to me and it's all about myself and taking care of me. And specifically in some of these deeper relationships, it's the death nail. It's the toxicity that steps in when you consider yourself higher than everyone else and you become the pinnacle of your existence. A, it's selfish. B, it's lonely. And C, there's no space for God in any of that. So whether single or married, when he's the cornerstone, when he's the king of your life, the idea is what he's compelling us to do, the path that he's calling to us to live is one of selflessness and service, that we would lay our lives down in respect and honor, and that we would also love like he loves us.
Right.
And I think that that's critical for everybody.
Absolutely. And again, I'm so excited that I got the chance to share this to single people, because I think sometimes we hear these marriage talks and are like, does that apply to me? Like, that sounds godly. Maybe I should love people that way, but it's true. Like, what a gift to be part of a community that God calls family, to be able to live this way and to know that we're not the only ones. Like, other people are trying to love us in this way too, and we get to show who God is that way. It's exciting. It's a gift.
Last one.
Okay.
30-year-old, 25-year-old Ashley is watching right now and is trying to figure out this singleness thing. Same pressures, same upbringing, same voices speaking into her head. What would you have to say to 25-year-old Ashley?
I think 25-year-old Ashley was really wrestling with loneliness. I was living in a village at the time, and I think I was so consumed with asking God to send me a partner to do this life with, to do this ministry with, that I missed out on the chance to recognize the way God was drawing close to me. And so I think I would just encourage her to change her prayer, to ask God for the life to the fullest that he knows he created me for, whatever that looks like tomorrow. And not to be so consumed, like we talked about at the beginning, with the destination of what it's going to look like for the rest of my life, but what it's going to look like tomorrow. So hopefully that's encouraging to someone out there.
Yeah, whether single or not, I think that's such a phenomenal word for this season, specifically for Center City Church. It's about what he's asking us to do today, in your next moment, and being faithful to the journey he's put you on.
Yeah.
Well, we're excited about next week. We continue our path series, and it is Father's Day. So if you're a dad, you might want to come up. hang out with us for 9 and 11, two service options, and we'll be streaming at 11 o'clock right here online. So we'll see you.